Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on delivering her second budget. I hope she enjoyed it, because it really should be her last. Yeah! What a total humiliation. A total humiliation. Last...
Can colleagues who are exiting the chamber do so swiftly, so we can focus on the Leader of the Opposition? Swiftly exit, quietly. Right. Leader of the Opposition.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female Chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever Chancellor.
Order. And the Chief Whip in particular knows that we don't allow clapping in the chamber. Leader of the Opposition.
Today she has announced a new tax rate of £26 billion. They're all cheering. Household income is down. Spending policies in this budget increase borrowing in every year. That smorgasbord of misery we just heard from her can be summed up in one sentence. Labour are hiking taxes to pay for welfare. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. These are the same, yes, they can chanter all they like. These are the same backbenchers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who cheered last year when she taxed jobs and left more than 100,000 people without an income. They cheered because they didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing, and they still don't. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not been an easy time for the Chancellor. No one liked seeing her sitting on those benches as it dawned on her that her own backbenchers were going to do to her political career what she's done to our economy. But she could have chosen today to bring down welfare spending and get more people into work. Instead, she has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes, taxes on anyone doing the right thing. She and this government have lost what little credibility they had left, and no one will ever trust her again. What's amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that she has the nerve to come to this House and claim this is all someone else's fault. A laundry list of excuses. Yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, they blame the Conservatives as if we've been sneaking into the Treasury under the cover of darkness to give pay rises to the unions. She inherited an economy with inflation at 2% and record high employment. She has tanked it in just over a year. Endless excuses. She blames Brexit. She blames Donald Trump. She needs to blame herself. And I've got some news for her. The Chancellor didn't seem to understand what the OBR was saying. Inflation is up, not down, and that inflation was stoked by her tax and spend decisions. The economic fiscal outlook says that they expect inflation to stay higher for longer. Everybody else has read it. She still hasn't read the OBR analysis. She blames higher than expected borrowing costs. Where does she think they came from? Those borrowing costs are driven by her lack of grip. She is paying more, you're saying us, she's paying more to borrow than Greece. She is paying more to borrow than at any point under the 14 years of Conservative government. Perhaps if Labour MPs read a book sometimes, they would know something. That includes an energy crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under us, we had an energy crisis sparked by a war in Ukraine and a global pandemic. What is her excuse? What is her excuse? She is taking the public for fools, but they are under no illusions whose fault this is. The fact is, the bad choices she is making today, choices to break promises, choices to put up taxes, choices to spend more of other people's money, are because of the bad choices she made at the last disastrous budget. If you want growth, you need to start with knowing what kind of country you want to be and make a plan to get there. Create certainty for the people and businesses who will drive growth. There is no growth and no plan because Labour focused on settling scores and scratching the itches they had in opposition. She promised stability, she delivered chaos. Just look at the circus around this budget. First the leaks, then more leaks to try to undo the damage. Calling panicky press conferences, U-turning on her U-turns, rolling the pitch one day only to plough through it the next. She had the cheek to talk about stability, Madam Deputy Speaker. She has become the first Chancellor in history to release the whole budget ahead of time. This is extraordinary. It tells you everything you need to know about her grip on the Treasury. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what have we got for all this chaos and disorder? There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. These figures are shocking. Does she really think that anyone will be confused by the sleight of her hand that she had in her speech? Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologize and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT showing a woman wallowing in self-pity, whining about mansplaining and misogyny. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor. Woman...
Order. Colleagues need to simmer down, most definitely, and just breathe a little and allow the Leader of the Opposition to be heard. Leader of the Opposition.
All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female. They're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Take her bright idea, the Office for Value for Money. It's been closed down because it didn't save a penny. In fact, it cost the taxpayer £1.6 million. You couldn't make this stuff up. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've identified a way to save taxpayers huge amounts of money by sacking just one person, the woman sitting opposite. The ex-chief economist of the Bank of England was not mansplaining. He wasn't mansplaining when he said the uncertainty around today's budget is the single biggest reason growth has flatlined. What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later. No wonder people are in despair. She says she wants people to respect her.
Order. Conservative colleagues are drowning out the Leader of the Opposition speech, so just be mindful nobody will be able to hear her at home. Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she says she wants people to respect her. Respect is earned. She apparently told Labour MPs this week, I'll show the media, I'll show the Tories, I will not let them beat me. Show us what? Making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetence, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us. She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless. Talk to any business. Talk to someone looking for a job. Unemployment is up every single month since Labour have been in office. They don't want to hear it, but it's true. They're shouting and complaining they cannot create jobs. It is the worst year for graduate recruitment on record. Are they proud of this? Companies like Merck and Ineos slashing investment plan.
Order. If you're on the front bench, I can obviously see you, Mr. Kyle. And there's no need for you to be chuntering this loud. They can see and hear you as well. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't want to hear the truth, but I'm speaking for all of those people out there who are sick of this government. Companies like Merck and Ineos are slashing investment plans. The construction sector has shrunk. How is that house building target going, by the way? I'll tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are miles behind and won't even come close to what we achieved. Business confidence is at record lows. No wonder today future growth has been revised down in every year of the scorecard. The papers are reporting that 1 in 8 business leaders is planning to leave Britain. Even one of Labour's biggest ever donors, Lakshmi Mittal, has fled the country.
Fled with a passport.
What we have in front of us is a budget littered with broken promises. She stood on a manifesto which promised better returns for UK savers. Today, she's putting up taxes on savings, on salary sacrifice even. She promised to give pensioners the security and retirement they deserve. Today, she slapped higher taxes on people saving for their pension. She promised to make Britain the best place in the world to invest and do business. Today, she has raised the dividend tax rates. She and the Prime Minister had already broken their promise to freeze council tax, but today she's decided to go even further, introducing a new property tax clobbering family homes that will only raise small amounts. This is Labour's Britain. This is Labour's Britain. People who work hard, Madam Deputy Speaker, people who work hard and save hard to buy their homes get taxed more, while those who don't work, who in some cases refuse to work, get their accommodation paid for by taxpayers. And then to top it all off, because taxing your home, your car, your savings and your pension wasn't enough, she has, by her own admission, broken her manifesto promise on income tax. Because in the last budget, she said, and I quote, I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax threshold. She said in that budget that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people and take money out of their payslips. But today, she has done exactly that. Why should anyone believe anything she's promised in this budget? And so where is the money going? Small changes to rail fares and prescriptions, these are distractions while she steals your wallet. The real story here, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real story is that Labour have lost control of welfare spending. Not only will working people have their tax thresholds frozen while benefits go up in line with inflation, not only have Labour abandoned reforms that would have saved the taxpayer £5 billion after pressure from these backbenchers, today they have added another £3 billion to the bill by scrapping the two-child benefit cap. We introduced that cap, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it means people on benefits have to make the same decisions about having children as everyone else. Even Labour voters know that it strikes the right balance between supporting people who are struggling and protecting taxpayers who are struggling themselves. Just this summer, the Chancellor admitted that lifting the two-child benefit cap was not affordable. But that was before the Prime Minister accidentally fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. So now he and the Chancellor are buying the votes of their own MPs with taxpayers' money. If she wants to reduce child poverty, she should stop taxing their parents and stop destroying their jobs. She congratulated herself on a new tax on landlords. Let me tell her this. Hiking tax on landlords will only push up rents. It will push landlords out of the market. The people who will suffer are the tenants. And then she talks about taxes on electric vehicles. These changes will hit rural drivers the hardest, but we know that Labour don't care about rural people. All this budget delivers is higher taxes and out-of-control spending. Nobody voted for this. The Chancellor must take responsibility. She chose to impose the jobs tax, driving unemployment higher month after month. She chose to abandon welfare reform, meaning the benefits bill is spiralling. She chose to spend more and more money she didn't have, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill. She is out of money, out of ideas, out of her depth, and she has run out of road. The country simply cannot afford a Chancellor who can't keep her own promises. Her position is untenable, and she knows it. She's talking to the Chancellor. Is he mansplaining to you, by the way? Is he mansplaining? Do you want some help? Would you like some help? What the Prime Minister should do is grow a backbone and sack her. But he won't, because he knows if she goes down, he goes down with her. So we're stuck with them both, Laurel and foolhardy. Does she have any sympathy for the people facing Christmas without a salary because of her jobs tax? For the retailers who are suffering sleepless nights because of their plummeting Christmas sales? People out there are crying. Last year, we had the horrors of the Halloween budget. This year, it's the nightmare before Christmas. And as for her, she's the unwelcome Christmas guest, 10 minutes through the door, and she's eaten all the Quality Street, Madam Deputy Speaker. But let me tell the Chancellor something she has forgotten. Behind every line in today's Red Book is a family, a home, a lifetime of work and sacrifice. People are frightened, and they have every reason to be. The Chancellor has spent the last year terrifying them. Every decision that she and the Prime Minister make puts more pressure on the people who keep this country going. If Labour are the party of working people, why is it that every day under them, thousands more people are signing off work and onto benefits? It's Conservatives who are the party of work. The Labour Party should be renamed the Welfare Party. And they are making a mistake. The British public don't want higher welfare spending. They want people in work providing for themselves. They want to live in a country where hard work pays, where what you put in reflects what you get out. And we agree with them. There is an alternative. We Conservatives have set it out. This budget could have saved £47 billion, including £23 billion from welfare. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit and using the rest to cut taxes. Oh, they're all pretending they're not listening. It's the shame of the mess they've made. It's the shame of the mess they've made.
Order. Mr. Vince. Mr. Thompson, you're so enthusiastic. I was worried you're going to knock Mr. War off his chair a moment ago, so we need to calm down and breathe, and we need to ensure that we can hear the Leader of the Opposition. Kemi Badenoch.
Even the dog is laughing at the Chancellor, Madam Deputy Speaker. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit, using the rest to cut taxes. She could have abolished stamp duty on homes to get the housing market moving, abolished business rates on shops to breathe life into our high streets. She could have introduced our cheap power plan. It saves a lot more money than what she announced would bring down energy costs for homes and businesses. That's what she should have done. She should be on the side of people who get up and go to work, people who take a risk to start a company, people working all hours to keep their business afloat. She should be on the side of the farmer, trying to hand something over to the next generation. The investor, deciding whether to spend their money in the UK or elsewhere. She should be on the side of the young person, looking for their first job. The saver, doing the right thing and putting money away for a rainy day. The pensioner, trying to enjoy a decent retirement. This country works when you make the country work for them. Only the Conservatives are on their side, Madam Deputy Speaker, and our plan for them is simple. Bring down energy costs, cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Colleagues are exiting. Can they do so quietly and quickly before we come to our first backbench contribution? Quietly and quickly. Other colleagues who are trying to catch my eye should return to their seats. I have noticed them bobbing. And we come to the chair of the Select Committee. We come to Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems like some ways a very long time since 2022. Remember that, where we had a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who put this country in hock to the bond markets, made mortgages rise and put the British public through living hell. Yeah. What a contrast with my right honourable friend today, who has put money into the NHS, is backing investment in our country, supporting start-ups and supporting the British public in a difficult cost of living crisis caused by the party opposite. Yeah. And while I want to go into what the Chancellor said today, I cannot let go without making some comments about the Right Honourable Member for Essex, the Leader of the Opposition. Who was shambolic, Madam Deputy Speaker? Them. Under them, mortgages went up. And we saw children entering in poverty in greater numbers. So who is the party that created child poverty? Them, not us. And who is the party that has consistently talked down this country since the election, being negative on every stage and downgrading people's confidence in our country? Who is the party of 0 hours contracts? The party opposite. And who is the party that failed consistently to invest in our schools? The party opposite. And the NHS, and our prisons, and our justice system. Under them, the country spiralled. And I spent a decade under the last government looking at public spending in the privileged role of chair of the Public Accounts Committee. I saw those mistakes close up. I saw the big nasties left, whichever government was elected in July last year. And I commend my right honourable friend for tackling those challenges. And the productivity that we've seen challenges on as a result of the OBR's decisions has been low since 2010. And who was in government since 2010? The party opposite. So they left the legacy, they left the big nasties, and it's now this government's job to clear it up. But amid all the noise, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must remember that the markets are listening, and we need to all be responsible. Government, opposition, every member of this House. And while speculation always swirls around a budget, and that is inevitable because we're all lobbying on behalf of our constituents, our local businesses and every other group that we represent, quite rightly, to persuade our government to do the things that we want to see. And we're all impatient to see those things happen yesterday. That's why we got elected, to make change. But the leaks that have happened around this budget have been very unfortunate. And I do hope my right honourable friend will grapple with this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the most recent leak of the OBR data, moments before her budget, is undermining for us all. So we will be raising that with the Office for Budget Responsibility when they appear in front of the Select Committee next week. But the Treasury Select Committee looked at a number of the issues that were being speculated around the budget: child poverty, gambling tax, cash ISAs, and others. And I'm grateful that my right honourable friend has tackled some of these. I wanted to touch First, on cash ISAs. We, in a report, recommended that the Chancellor didn't reduce the limit on cash ISAs from £20,000, and she's reduced it not from the 10 that was being mooted, but to 12. The concern is that for short-term savers, there can be a real issue there, and with targeted support coming next year and work on the advice guidance boundary, there is an opportunity to bring the British public into a more investing environment and to make them invest or encourage them to invest more. But after so many years, when we've all been warned that your capital is at risk, like on the cigarette packets, that you might die if you smoke, it takes a long time to turn that culture around. Yeah. I do want to pay tribute to the financial inclusion and literacy campaign that the Financial Times backs, which is running a programme in Shoreditch Park City Academy in my constituency over 3 years, with years 7, 8 and 9, to encourage them to teach them about financial literacy. Yeah. They will be the investors of the future, but it will take some time for those young people to get to the point where they invest. So I am pleased that the Chancellor did exempt over 65s from this limit, because that short-term saving is important, and particularly for that age group that is planning for retirement or indeed in retirement. Yeah. I really welcome her support for start-ups. In my constituency, this is a huge issue, and widening enterprise support, something that I know my sister committee, the Business and Trade Committee, will no doubt be looking at. And encouraging companies to list in London, absolutely right. The 3-year stamp duty relief will hopefully be enough to encourage that. We've seen too many companies listing elsewhere, and we need them here in the UK to grow our economy and create those jobs. There's a lot of technical issues around reviews of business tax, which I'm sure we will be looking over. We're putting our slide rule across all of the measures in the budget today. I note that the Chancellor is talking about 4.9% million of efficiencies by government departments by 2031. That is going to be a potential challenge, and so I think the Public Accounts Committee, another sister committee, will no doubt be looking at that alongside the Treasury Select Committee. But I'm really pleased that she's giving HMRC more powers to pursue promoters of tax avoidance schemes. We know what the problems have been there, and the Treasury Select Committee has the privilege and responsibility of challenging His Majesty's Revenue and Customs regularly, and they will be in front of us in January, and we'll be able to ask them more about that then. But for me, one of the central planks for me as a constituency MP of why we needed a Labour government, because of what the other party did to children living in poverty. There are 4.5 million children in poverty in this country. That's gone up by almost 1 million since 2012. 2 million of them are in deep poverty, and that's 1 in 3 children living below the poverty line in 2025 in the United Kingdom. Children are sharing beds with their siblings or parents turning up to school tired, and every weekend I visit people in my constituency and I see this challenge. Just last weekend, a woman showed me the bedroom she shares with her now disabled husband because he had a stroke 3 years ago. And she has a curtain between their double bed and a narrow space so her daughter can share their room, while in their case, luckily, they have a second bedroom where her 2 sons sleep in a bunk bed. That is the reality for so many children, and the poverty impacts their learning and their ability to perform in the world. And it is a shameful stain on this country that when this government entered power, the UK ranks 37th out of 39 advanced economies on child poverty. I will certainly go away.
Really grateful to it. I agree with everything she just said about child poverty and welcome the lifting of the cap. But is there a little bit of a blind spot for this government on rural poverty? Government figures themselves show by the end of next year the average hill farmer will earn barely just above half the national minimum wage. Is she as disappointed as I am that the government has not tackled this in the budget and indeed got rid of the family farm tax, which is going to tax many of them out of existence altogether?
The honourable gentleman is a veritable champion for his constituency and for rural issues. I think there are very big, important changes here in the minimum wage and the living wage, which will have an impact, and there's lots that could be welcomed for rural areas too. But I recognise that his constituency and mine sometimes have very different challenges, and I welcome the fact that he does champion that here. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to look through the Red Book and the Blue Book at this point, but we will bear that in mind on the committee. But 70% of children in poverty are in working families, so the idea that the chutzpah of the Leader of the Opposition to stand up and say this is a lifestyle choice for people really makes my blood boil. 60% 40% of households hit by the limit are in work, and 15% of affected families are mothers with babies too young for work. And then, and my right honourable friend said it better than any of us could, the Victorian rape clause, the humiliation that women face, that affects notionally 3,600 women, but we heard evidence in the Treasury Select Committee of women who will not put themselves or their children through that humiliation. And any policy that required a workaround like that is outdated and long needed to be gone. And I commend my right honourable friend. And there's been further investment in young people. Certainly.
I thank her for a forensic analysis of our budget, but will she take an intervention from the Leader of the Opposition so she can apologise for this awful policy and its impact?
Well, it is interesting that they're doubling down, the opposition is doubling down on this policy, which is humiliating people. And let's be clear, the birth rate in this country has fallen year on year for the last 3 years. It is well below where it needs to be. I think only in Luton is it actually at 2.1%, which is about where it needs to be. Well, actually, it's a bit lower than where it needs to be. This is a real crisis for this country in the long term. So it's absolutely right that my right honourable friend is investing in the future of Britain. These young people may be poor. In my constituency, they're poor, but they are no poverty of ambition there. Children I met when I was elected 20 years ago are now doctors, are barristers, are enterprising business people. In spite of the challenges they face, just think about the ones who didn't get there because they didn't overcome the challenges of deep-seated poverty. So we should invest in our young people, and that is what this government is doing, including with the apprenticeships and the youth guarantee and the 9 youth hubs in London, one of which is in my constituency. And I really welcome that my right honourable friend listened to the Treasury Select Committee on the gambling taxation regime. We're a cross-party committee, but we had a unanimous report saying that there was a real issue about the lower tax on online gaming and because of the relative harm that that caused compared to going to the races or popping along to your local betting shop. So I very much welcome my right honourable friend's decision to do that, which is contributing to that, the payment to take out those children out of poverty. I do on the lifetime, the ISA changes. I just wonder, I caution to my right honourable friend that I hope that the Treasury is watching very closely the impact on mortgage lending by building societies, because in the evidence we heard that was a concern. And if we want to get people into their own homes with the building that's going to be going on, we need to make sure that those mortgages are available to them. So I hope that the Treasury is in ongoing dialogue on that issue, despite this change having been made. But we now need to recognise some of the challenges as well about green taxes. And I haven't had a chance to go through the Red Book in the time since the Chancellor sat down. But I very much welcome my right honourable friend's bold and necessary decision to take on the challenge of the reduction in fuel duty as people move to electric vehicles. This has been a point of debate for at least the last decade or so. Certainly on the time that I was on the Public Accounts Committee, we kept challenging the Treasury about how they're going to fill that gap. And my right honourable friend has been bold and right to challenge that. It's a difficult one to grapple with, but she's great that she's done that, and I think we need to be, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And in terms of supporting people because of the cost of living, the freeze on rail fares, keeping the bus fare cap, these are things that help people get to work. And the ongoing freeze on fuel duty will help with that too. And the increase in the minimum wage and the living wage are vital. In my constituency, some people work 4 jobs over 7 days just to make ends meet. If they're lucky to have a council tenancy, even on those salaries, it's hard to make ends meet. If you try to go into the private sector, completely unaffordable if you're on that kind of income. And yet contrast that with people who earn enough to work 4 days a week because they can afford to do so. I'm not criticising them for that life choice, but that is the challenge and the difference that's faced. So the challenge on, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, about a high value property tax. In my constituency, on a rough calculation, around 1% of properties are worth over 2 million in central London. So when the opposition scream foul on this, I think in zone 1 and 2 in central London, right on the edge of the city, 10 minutes from Liverpool Street, around 1% of people will face that surcharge. That is a small price to pay when next door our families are living in the deepest poverty that I have described. And it's great to see some movement on energy bills, which is having a really, really big impact. There's a lot more detail in this budget, which the Treasury Select Committee will be looking at over the next couple of weeks, and we look forward to welcoming the Chancellor to the committee on the 10th of December, where we will both ask her to explain, but we will also challenge her, as is our proper constitutional responsibility, about the detail of her budget.
I call the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we're looking forward to the Treasury Select Committee challenging the government on the details. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected on a promise of tackling the cost of living and growing the economy, and this is the second budget where it's failed to do either. For millions of people struggling with higher bills, all this budget really offers is higher taxes. The OBR sets it out in black and white. Disposable income, living standards are down thanks to this budget. Surely the Chancellor should have learned from her first failed budget that you can't tax your way to growth. Under the Conservatives, the UK's tax burden reached its highest level since 1948 and it hit the economy. Yet under this budget, the tax burden will hit an all-time high. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an alternative to all these Conservative and Labour taxes, and the shocking reality is the government knows it, and that's a new trade deal with Europe. A major new deal to cut the cost of living and grow our economy. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has cost the Treasury £90 billion a year in lower tax revenue. Imagine if the Chancellor had adopted our plan to reverse those Brexit costs. Imagine how much more we could be helping families and pensioners across our country with the cost of living. Imagine how we could be ending the cost of living crisis today.
Order. I made it very clear earlier on, and you're a senior member of the House. No intervention should be made, nor will be taken. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm happy to talk to him in the tea room afterwards. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government know the damage the Conservative reform Brexit deal has done to every family and every business across our country. And yet they choose to reject the single biggest policy for ending the cost of living crisis, turbocharging economic growth and boosting tax revenues without raising tax. A new trade deal with Europe, properly fixing our broken relationship with Europe with a new customs union. Growing our economy by freeing British businesses from the costs, barriers and red tape favoured by the Conservatives and Reform. Rather than trying to tax their way out of debt, as Labour is choosing, Liberal Democrats would grow our way out of debt. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be fair to the Chancellor, she has recently spoken about the terrible damage that the Conservatives' Brexit deal has done to our economy. The deal that promised to save us £350 million a week, but ended up costing the taxpayer £1.7 billion every week. But where is the Chancellor's urgency and ambition to fix the problem she rightly identifies? Today, she didn't even mention the huge hit to the Treasury from Brexit. She is like a doctor who has diagnosed the disease but refuses to administer the cure. Refusing to take up our plan for a brand new deal with the EU, a much better deal for Britain than anything the government has pursued so far, with a new customs union at its heart. Madam Deputy Speaker, everyone but the most extreme Brexiteers now realise what a costly economic disaster the Brexit deal has been. Whether you're a young family struggling with ever higher food prices, or a high street business just trying to survive the chance of the latest new cost or tax, people are understandably looking for a credible economic policy to change their futures for the better. And it's crystal clear now. Only the Liberal Democrats are providing the leadership on our economy people are crying out for. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are some measures the Chancellor has announced today that we do welcome. At last, she has decided to tax the big online gambling firms by raising remote gaming duty, as the Liberal Democrats have been calling for. Problem gambling is related to hundreds of suicides every year. So, of course, online casinos and the like should absolutely pay more tax on their huge profits. Her decision to scrap the rate clause is an excellent one. And I may not have heard the Leader of the Opposition, but I wasn't sure if she welcomed that. I hope the Conservative Party will welcome that. And the Chancellor's decision to scrap the two-child limit is excellent. It was in our general election manifesto, and I'm glad that she is now enacting Liberal Democrat policy. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's clearly the most effective way of lifting children out of poverty, and it will save taxpayers' money in the long term. And the biggest relief today for millions of families and pensioners is the action the Chancellor is taking to reduce energy bills, and we welcome it. But even after the Chancellor's changes, it will still leave the typical household paying hundreds of pounds a year more on their energy bills than 5 years ago. So more action will be needed. But we need action on energy bills that works. Reform and the Conservative Party pretend that the answer to rising energy bills is to scrap our climate commitments and stop investing in renewables. They couldn't be more wrong. The Conservative reform energy policy would put up bills and just make the UK even more reliant on imported fossil fuels with their volatile and high prices. That would be a disaster for our economy, a disaster for our environment, and a disaster for jobs, and a disaster for people struggling with energy bills. Madam Deputy Speaker, a major winner from reform's energy policies would be Vladimir Putin. Now, that might explain why the Honourable Member for Clacton is so keen on it. So I urge the government, don't listen to the Conservatives or Reform. Be more ambitious in cutting people's energy bills. Take up our plan to cut energy bills even more right now and to cut them in half within a decade, finally giving families and pensioners the relief they need from this cost of living crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, while there are some things to welcome, which I've just done, there are quite a lot of measures in this budget that will cause a lot of pain and unfairness, all of which could have been avoided if the Chancellor had gone for growth with Europe instead. Her plans to tax salary sacrifice will be hugely damaging to savings and pensions, and it looks like it's another NI hit on workers, Madam Deputy Speaker. And why, when the electricity vehicle market still needs a boost to get going, is she taxing electric vehicles? And if she wasn't spending £1.8 billion on digital ID, many of these tax rises would not have been needed in the first place. And her failure to U-turn on the family farm tax is a huge error. Madam Speaker, if the Chancellor was really looking to tax those with the broadest shoulders, then why not put a windfall tax on the big banks who are literally making billions at the taxpayers' expense due to a side effect of quantitative easing? But the worst tax hike of this budget by far, the biggest tax rise of this budget, is the Chancellor's decision to repeat the Conservative policy of freezing income tax thresholds. Freezing these thresholds reduces the amount people can earn tax-free and hits the lowest paid the hardest. But I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, hearing the Conservative leader criticise it now rings incredibly hollow. And I think the member for Berkshire was objecting to her comments. The Leader of the Opposition cheered Conservative budgets after Conservative budgets that did exactly the same thing as the Chancellor did, raising taxes on the low-paid. The Conservatives dragged an extra 4 million people on very low incomes into paying income tax and an extra 3.5 million people into paying the 40p rate. And the OBR says this government is now planning to drag a further 750,000 low-paid workers into tax and nearly 1 million people into the 40p rate. So someone on the average salary is paying an extra £582 this year because of the Conservatives' policy, and under the Chancellor's plans, they will pay an extra £300 a year by 2031. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, contrast that with our record on income tax. We raised the personal allowance by £4,000. We cut income tax by £825 for millions of people and took 3.4 million of the lowest paid out of paying income tax altogether. It is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Liberal Democrats are the only party that believes in cutting income tax for ordinary people. Labour and the Conservatives make them pay more. As well as adding income tax pain to families struggling with the cost of living crisis, this budget will also add to the cost of doing business crisis facing Britain's hospitality sector, where she went nowhere near far enough. Our high streets are suffering. Pubs, restaurants, cafes, caravan parks, zoos, even our beloved theme parks. They are struggling against higher business rates and the government's misguided jobs tax. The Liberal Democrats called on the Chancellor to help them with an emergency 5% VAT cut for hospitality for the next 18 months. That would have been a lifeline for some of our most beloved local businesses and for people's jobs, boosting local economies across Britain. And it is very disappointing that the Chancellor hasn't listened to our calls. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say how disappointed I am with how little there was for carers in this budget? As a carer myself for much of my life, I'm determined to speak up for the millions of carers less fortunate than I am. Millions of family carers and care workers who make enormous sacrifices looking after loved ones. Carers who keep our NHS going. Carers who keep our society going. They deserve far more support from the government, and I will keep pressing their case. Now, I do welcome the Carers Allowance review, but it confirms our argument that the Carers Allowance system is out of date and is in need of urgent change, and we're yet to hear commitments to those changes. I welcome the decision to reassess cases where overpayment has caused huge hardship, but with the changes not coming to force for another year, the government must instruct the DWP to immediately suspend repayments during that delay and swiftly deliver compensation. More needs to be done to help family carers juggle their jobs with their caring responsibilities. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we urgently need the Social Care Commission to actually start fixing the system on a cross-party basis and make sure our loved ones get the care they need. The Chancellor cannot claim to be supporting our NHS properly, however much money she puts in, while she and Treasury officials keep blocking the social care reforms that alone can transform the health service across the country and boost our economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, a caring society, a growing economy, a plan to drive down household bills, boost high streets and go for growth with Europe. That is the vision the Chancellor should have set out today. Instead, we got a low-growth, high-tax budget from a government that I fear just isn't listening.
Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's an honour to follow the leader of the Liberal Democrats in this debate, the member for Kingston and Surbiton. And put very simply, this is a family-friendly budget. Every family up and down the UK will be welcoming this. Gone is the vile rape clause, and an increase in family income is very, very welcome. We've been through many traumatic times together in this House. We've been through the global financial crisis and its long tail. We've been through Brexit, and the Right Honourable Member who spoke before me is quite right to emphasise the vast difference between our economy while we were in the European Union and now that we're not. And I welcome the work being done at Cabinet level and ask Cabinet to redouble their efforts to work on good trade arrangements under the EU-UK Security Pact to improve our economy and enlarge our economy. And of course, COVID. We heard of COVID this week with the report. And we all remember not just the impact on the economy, but the terrible impact, particularly on younger people, and the impact that long tail is having on so many of our young people who are still feeling too unwell to work or whose work opportunities have been severely reduced through anxiety, depression and all the other things which not just COVID but that context of fiscal austerity brought down upon them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a multi-faith, multi-ethnic constituency which works really hard on community cohesion. When all is said and done, we rub along well together in Hornsey and Fry and Barnet. From recent rhetoric, it could be assumed that there is deep unhappiness and division. In fact, I want to put on record the opposite. I would like to put on record the contribution to our local economy from all parts of my constituency, regardless of skin colour, faith or school qualifications. Of course, my community also faces challenges. We have unacceptably high numbers of children living in households where incomes don't cover the basics, heating, eating and rent, and I really welcome today's statement on heating, help for households, on eating, school meals, more breakfast clubs and helping in particular secondary school children with their nutrition, and rent, quite rightly introducing a little more tax on some of the landlords who in a wealthy place like London will be making quite a lot and can afford to pay a little more. It's my first budget as a member of the Treasury Committee, and this budget has rewarded those who fought to restore hope, stop the chaos of the 14 years of Conservative governments and deliver change. Remember the election? We promised change. Today we saw change. That change is an end to poverty-line family budgets, and the hope is that we finally see food banks close for good.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and especially she is a colleague with me on the Treasury Select Committee. In terms of the government delivering hope, a key part of the government's economic forecasting is, of course, the OBR. And what has driven a lot of what has driven the budget today is a 16 billion productivity downgrade by the OBR. We heard on the Treasury Select Committee that there was actually very little basis behind that productivity forecast in the first place, basically based on purely what the UK productivity was pre-2008, with not much little depth beyond that. So does the honourable member agree with me that the OBR has serious work to do to look at the robustness of its forecasts?
On the Treasury Select Committee for that, and I think there was quite a lot in today's budget on skills, on nutrition for children so that they can get their educational qualifications, and quite a lot that will help us to solve the productivity puzzle. But I do look forward to questioning with him the OBR on their data, how they got to that position, and how we can be helpful in pushing the government towards even more investment in skills, apprenticeships, and in deepening our investment in young people so that our productivity can improve over time. I know that so many of us here in the House are in politics because we want every child and every family to have the chance to thrive in school, in work and in life. And let's look back at past Labour governments. In 1945, despair and hunger stalked many communities. London was flattened in the Blitz, and yet rationing would continue for 9 more years. Keynes famously said, anything we can actually do, we can afford. We are immeasurably richer than our predecessors. And then what did Labour do? Went on to build the NHS, built the country, built a welfare state. We can do this. We will make the UK fairer. And today is a really good start on that journey. Very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I know so many people wish to speak today. As a former borough leader, I introduced school meals for all primary school children. It was a great equaliser and social leveller. Children were more focused, made better progress. Families who were just about managing saved money, and there was no stigma. Everyone sat together and talked with each other. Free school meals for all primary schools were subsequently rolled out across London, and we know from today that more secondary school children will benefit under the government's proposals. We need to continue to restore hope and deliver change. The two-child cap on universal credit, of course, another pro-family measure, the most cost-effective, quick measure to bring up to 500,000 children out of poverty, and paid for by the most addictive forms of gambling, which has been increased. My personal view is we could have gone even further on the gambling, and I hope that it raises between £1 and £3 billion, because I think that remote gambling in your bedroom on your phone is deeply damaging to society. Yeah. The Trussell's September 2025 Hunger in the UK makes for sobering reading. In 2024, 16% of UK households were food insecure, which of course we know is not a food problem, it's an income problem, and this is an issue we must continue to interrogate. I'm very pleased to have secured a backbench debate on food inflation and poverty. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, together with school meals, more breakfast club provision, a higher living wage since the general election, slowly the living standards of families will turn around. It's particularly positive to see the first woman Chancellor recognise the impact which the difficult financial climate has had on families. I hope that by this time next year, once these measures are really embedded, we'll begin to see the closure of food banks. I've heard a lot about what we want to see by the end of this Parliament. Let's aim for a closure of food banks in this country by 2029. And we hope to feel that every child and every family will have the chance to thrive.
To help colleagues, they are now permitted to make an intervention, and a backbencher may wish to accept or decline that. And I call Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Budgets aren't easy for chancellors because there are so many things beyond your control, but being forced to make trade-offs reveals priorities. And I'm afraid today's priority was not economic growth, but political survival. That's because there was one central call the Chancellor had to make today. Do we reform welfare or do we raise tax? Getting our welfare bill down to pre-pandemic levels would save about £47 billion a year within 5 years. It wouldn't have been easy, but it would have meant no tax rises and plenty of headroom in public finances. Instead, welfare spend is going up and jobs and growth are going down. In every single day of the government's first year, around 2,200 people have been signed off, not just working, but even having to look for work. That's 1 million more people on universal credit just in the last year. Most of those claimants cite mental health, but every doctor I ever spoke to as Health Secretary said that people with anxiety and depression need social contact. That means being at work, not being at home. So this could, I will very happily give way to the Chair of the Select Committee.
On the point of mental health, he is absolutely right to point out that that is one of the drivers of people going on universal credit that does need tackling. So does he share my alarm that today in the HSJ it's been reported that this government's planning to water down the mental health investment standard, which starts to reverse the trend that we saw over many years of achieving parity of esteem between physical and mental health?
I absolutely share the Honourable Lady's concern about that. That was introduced when I was Health Secretary, and this could have been the budget in which the Chancellor announced that we will speed up treatment for people with mental illness and not park them on welfare. This could have been the budget that said that we will eliminate fraud by stopping completely benefit applications by phone. It could have been the budget that said that instead of relying on migration to help firms expand, we will make sure that people at home are fit to join the workforce. Instead, the welfare bill is going up by around £14 billion, not least because of the totally unfair abolition of the two-child cap, which I fear will see more children, not less, living in the structural poverty caused when there are no adults in the household at work. And I will happily give way to...
He surely, given his background, must recognise that there is a direct link between social policy and economic policy, that this country needs a working-age population to fund future pensions and welfare bills for generations in the future. How on earth can you do that if you're not encouraging children to be brought up and raised in a household that can afford to feed them?
Order. How on earth can you do that? We can't start off these 4 days of budget debate with the word you and your. So quickly, come to your conclusion with the right language.
Well, I think she brought me to order just at the right time.
I recognise that the Honourable Gentleman's concern about child poverty is sincere. I just have a totally different view as to how to reduce child poverty in this country. I think financing people to have ever larger families means more children growing up in poverty, not less. And I think the evidence for that is that under the previous Conservative government, we had 1 million fewer children growing up in workless households, and child poverty in absolute terms fell. And he needs to look at that evidence. And the taxes and the price we are paying for this mushrooming welfare bill is that taxes are growing up, and they are already starting to destroy growth. 180,000 fewer payroll jobs in the last year. Unemployment up, inflation up, interest rates higher than they would have been. And the tragedy is that absolute poverty, which, as I said, fell under the previous Conservative governments, is now likely to rise under Labour as jobs vanish and welfare rolls soar. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way. I grew up in poverty. 1 in 4 children in Bournemouth, the town that I represent here, grow up in poverty. I can tell the honourable member, growing up in poverty is not a good thing. It's an awful thing for the life chances of the child. It's an awful thing for the family that care for them. It's an awful thing for the community that wraps their arms around the child. But would he agree with me too that he is ignoring the future costs of child poverty? I used to run mental health and domestic abuse services. I can certainly tell him that when children grow up in poverty and then in later life can't find the education, training and support that they need because of their trauma as a child, they cause extra costs for the public services that we then have to meet. Does he not agree with me that we should be preventing those future costs?
I absolutely agree with him, but I profoundly disagree on the way the government is choosing to do that, because by expanding the welfare bill, expanding the number of large families living in poverty, you are making the root causes of poverty worse and not better. And let me say this, the Chancellor says that there is a growth plan, but it was very difficult to discern anything at all in today's budget. We know, for example, that raising public sector productivity to private sector levels would add 0.4% to annual GDP growth. We know that proper planning reforms would add 0.4%. We know that proper welfare reform would add 0.3%. We know that getting energy bills down properly adds 0.3%. We know that AI could dwarf all of that, according to Microsoft and Accenture, potentially adding 1% a year. But we got none of that today. Instead, we had a government arriving in office saying they wanted growth, 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 without knowing how they're going to get there. And growth needs a plan, not a soundbite. And it's that lack of a plan, or even a guiding philosophy, which is why today we've ended up with a budget that damages growth, damages investment, damages jobs, and most tragically of all, damages opportunities for young people, of whom there will shortly be 1 million not in employment, education or training. I give way to the honourable member.
Respected member of the House, but I think it's really important that we reflect on the facts. The Chancellor announced today, as did the OBR, that growth is up from 1% to 1.5% this year, and he talks about having a plan on planning reform, a subject I'm very interested in. Why then did his party abstain and not back our planning reforms?
I think he's absolutely right. We should look at the facts, and the facts are very clear that the OBR upgraded growth for this year, and then they downgraded it for every single year of the forecast thereafter, and that is why the overall size of the economy is shrinking as a result of the measures taken by the Chancellor in the last budget, and I'm afraid made much worse in this budget. And I agree with him that we do need to go further on planning reform, but I don't think we have any plan for the government for the really substantive changes that would align incentives between local communities and national government when it gets to, for example, planning approval for big infrastructure projects. And I would cheer from the rafters if we heard that from the Chancellor, because it is urgently needed. And please, this is something which I think is most disappointing of all. Please, can the government not tell us that everything is just going to be fine because they're not the evil Tories? Those terrible Tories got inflation down. They got inflation down from 11% to 2%. They saw 4 million new jobs in the economy, 4 million new jobs as opposed to nearly 200,000 fewer. They grew the economy faster than France, Germany, Italy or Japan. And They attracted more foreign greenfield direct investment than anywhere in the world apart from China and the United States. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Could he remind us which government led to 11% inflation? Could he remind us which government crashed the economy? And could he also speak to the 1,970 children, estimated, in Morecambe and Lunesdale who will benefit from the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, and tell them why they should continue to live in poverty?
Interventions must be short and to the point, and an actual question or a statement. So, Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to tell her which government was responsible for 11% inflation. The Russian government was responsible for 11% inflation, and I will happily look in the eye the 200,000 fewer children in absolute poverty after a succession of Conservative governments because of those 4 million jobs created on our watch. And let me say this, these dreadful Tories increased the number of doctors and nurses in the NHS by a third. Those posh Tories increased standards in state schools to have the highest reading standards in the Western world. And that is because, Madam Deputy Speaker, progressive instincts don't pay the bill for good public services. A strong economy does. I will give way to my Honourable.
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. During that period, can you remind the House what happened to the deficit, which was inherited at over 10%? And, maybe we'll just deal with that.
Well, absolutely right, because the Chancellor makes a great play of fiscal responsibility. Incidentally, I hope she will correct the record when she said that she was reducing debt, when the OBR's Economic and Financial Outlook says that it's going up from 95% of GDP to 96% of GDP. Exactly. But yes, when the previous Conservative government came to office, the government was borrowing nearly £1 in every 4 that it was spending on public services. We reduced that deficit from 10% to 2%, and the party opposite opposed us every single step of the way. I will give way one last time to my right honourable friend.
Well, I thank him for giving me. I couldn't resist, as we're going down memory lane, to remind him when we came to power in 2010, we had a youth unemployment crisis. Youth unemployment plunged when we were in office. Now Labour are back in office. They've imposed the national insurance contribution tax. Youth unemployment is soaring again. Is that not a damning indictment of the party office?
Labour legacy.
And they might find that difficult to hear from a former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister, but they might want to listen to the Resolution Foundation, which has been saying exactly the same thing on the airways today. It has been, and no one disputes the progressive credentials of the Resolution Foundation, but they have been warning against this rise in the minimum wage and all the extra workers' rights because they say it will lead to a crisis, or it could lead to a crisis in youth unemployment. I don't want to leave the Honourable Lady out, but I promise that will be my last intervention.
I thank him very much for giving way. Is the right honourable gentleman proud, and does he find it fiscally responsible that he, in his 2 budgets, left us with the lowest amount of fiscal headroom since the OBR was created, at £8.9 billion in 2024, leaving the current Chancellor and the present Labour government a mountain to climb in order to get us back to £22 billion of solid headroom?
I am proud that I dealt with a real black hole of 72 billion, not a fake one of 22 billion in my fiscal events, that I met the fiscal rules every time. And if she's really concerned about that low headroom, why did the Shadow Chancellor at the time, and now the current Chancellor, not object once